Lemonade Car Show brought to you by Omvic and Crown. I'm joined today by George Eny. He's the president of the APA, and we welcome Warren Barnard. He's with the UCDA, which is the Used Car Dealer Association of Canada. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. You both know that. It's good to have you back, Warren.
Good to be back, Lorraine.
We're going to get into some used car stuff. There's a lot of interesting new things that have been going on with the UCDA, but just off the top, I was reading something yesterday, and I wanted your take on it because you're both parents and you're both drivers and pedestrians. Honolulu has finally introduced a zombie walk law, they call it, which is when pedestrians have their face buried in their phone when they're crossing. It's a complaint of mine. I've written about it in the past. As road users and road sharers, these are the terms we're using now. Everyone has a role when it comes to being on the road. Do you think we're going to see more of this? The onus has always been on drivers because that's where the insurance is and that's where the money is. Drivers aren't always at fault. We've also got pedestrians and cyclists.
Well, ideally, we'd move beyond just a fault paradigm, too, where you would think defensively as a motorist, but also as a more vulnerable pedestrian or a cyclist. So maybe stay out of blind spots, look before you cross the street. I think those are important. Often the conversation just around right-of-way leads to well, right, but it doesn't lead to a resolution of the issue, which is that you have a mismatch of masses, a very hard, heavy object moving fast and a soft one moving slower, and also the fact that distraction is really a big problem for everybody. Even cyclists sometimes are on their phones not paying attention.
And I think part of the problem is that manufacturers are building in a ton of safety features into cars, and a lot of them are like, oh, we now recognize flesh, which is awesome, and they'll start to slow the car down.
I'm hoping dearly that the more advanced systems that we're seeing now that can have pedestrian and cyclist detection really will work. I know people say, well, that's not a replacement for common sense. You should have looked, and as a cyclist or pedestrian, you know, you should probably follow the signaling better, but the reality is I'm hoping that will reduce the conflicts between vehicles and people.
And the other problem is the fatality rates are rising. They're not going down from the pedestrian thing. You got kids, Warren. Mm-hmm. When they're little, you know what this is like to help them cross the road.
Of course.
And we've got parents, especially, they're crossing in the middle of a crosswalk. Their kids are with them. The kids are watching. They're watching you do this, and you're telling them. Mm-hmm. And you can't turn around later and say, don't do that. So where does it start? It starts with...
We have to set the example, don't we, as the adults. I mean, I drive past schools on my way to the office or when I'm out and about, and there are crosswalks there, and 20, 30 feet from the crosswalk, you've got parents leading their kids across the street. They could walk the 20 or 30 feet over to the crosswalk and come across, but it's...
Now for teenagers with cell phones, which they all have,
sure.
Do you have house rules about cell phones in cars when they're not with you anymore, when they're driving? I have boys, they're not quite as bad as girls, and girls can get mad at me, I'm sorry, but girls are more into the phones than the boys are. And I used to say throw it in the trunk or let someone else hang on to it. How do we get the kids to put the phone down, the teenagers? How do we ask them to do that? How do we get them to?
I wish I had an answer for that.
I mean, there's kill switches sometimes.
Yeah, there are. And certainly my oldest drives. My youngest hasn't got her license yet, but my oldest certainly knows enough not to be texting on her phone while she's driving, and I mean, we've taught her that, and it is common sense, George, as you said, but unfortunately common sense is not very common out there.
Well, and the phone is kind of addictive.
It is addictive, and I think it's been shown to be an addiction.
Gambling.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Do you think with cars we're going to see a kill switch, like they're entering in some stadiums and things like that, where they can shut off phones? Do you think that car tech is going to have to end up there? Possibly?
We're going the other way. The cars are being designed to be fully connected all the time. So I think, no, actually, the direction the industry is taking is they're going to put the technology into the car and then new technology to make the car see things that you're not seeing anymore. The opposite would be, obviously the opposite solution would be to say, look, clearly the two shouldn't mix. So really what you would want is the phone to have an app that defeats some receiving and sending features, except in emergencies when the vehicle is moving. But that's not where we're going. We're going in the opposite direction.
A few years ago, a lot of the nav systems I use, I could think of only one that would let me be poking away at it when I was driving. Yes. Not that I would do that, just testing for everyone at home. Now more and more of them, I can be entering stuff when I'm driving. Of course, technically it's like for the passenger can do it. So am I crazy, or are more of them letting you input while you're driving?
Well, I can tell you the one I have, and mine's not a new car by any means, but it does not let me do it while I'm driving. Although it does let me do it through voice activation.
Okay.
I can set
Right, and
destinations that
That will
way.
be the solution.
And that'll be the solution. But George, even that's distracting.
Of course it is.
Right?
No,
I
no,
mean,
for sure.
Yeah.
We've built so many distractions into the vehicles at the same time as we're putting more and more autonomous features and safety features. To some degree, they conflict or they cancel each other out. But as we get more and more autonomous vehicles with more safety features, as you described, that's hope that will be part of the solution to solving this problem. Every
So-
week we hear people getting hit by vehicles, unfortunately.
So the industry's banking on collision avoidance tech.
So bigger airbags and
No.
collision avoidance.
Collision
Well,
avoidance.
collision
A
avoidance,
vehicle
yes.
that will see
Yeah,
when
the
you're
car
not
will
looking.
stop or
and
it
will
will-
stop
yeah.
itself or
Because
make take an evasive maneuver.
Because distracted, and basically that's texting, is climbed above drunk driving for fatality and injury rates. And so how do I say with a straight face, I'd rather deal with a drunk driver than a texting driver? But it's true. Drunks are trying to drive straight. Most of them are looking at the road at least.
I don't know. I think that's a pretty dangerous calculus. I don't.
No,
I've-
it's a
I'm-
horrible calculus, but the fact
I'm
is...
not sure that
Oh, no,
a
no, the-
severely impaired person is. Anyway, the point is they're
But that's
both
what I
forms
mean.
of impairment.
both-
It's
yeah,
terrible,
they're
but I'm
both
saying
terrible.
the numbers, the cold numbers which come from insurance and everywhere else, is
Well,
that
more
distracted...
people text than drive
Yes.
than drive drunk.
and they're causing more fatalities. So, I mean, it's all bad. You want it gone. But I'm like, I think it's horrible that that has replaced drunk driving. I thought we were finally getting a handle on
Well-
most of the drunk driving. There's like a 10% hard ceiling that won't
So
quit. But
if you look at the period from, say, the 2005 to 2010, the cars were getting a lot better in terms of occupant protection. There were improvements coming through, and yet we did not see the continued drop in fatality and injuries. It plateaued, and then it actually recently
It's
just
gonna
slightly bumped up.
it is. It's going
And
up again.
that's not because the vehicles got worse. The vehicles got better, but we're not seeing the
People got worse.
dividends. Yeah,
Yeah.
the people got worse.
We'll be back after this message with more Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by Omvic and Crown. I'm with Georgini, the president of the APA, and Warren Barnard. He's with the Used Car Dealer Association of Ontario. Warren, you have a new feature the UCDA has launched. Why don't you tell us a little
Yeah,
bit
we're
about it?
just in the process, Lorraine, of launching it now. It's a new feature aimed at consumer as well as to benefit our member dealers in Ontario. And it's a new website called OntarioCars.ca. And it's a unique vehicle listing website to search for vehicles for the consumer to purchase from UCDA member dealers. It does not have the risk that you would have on other sites where private sellers are selling, and specifically curbsiders are on some of these other sites, and that is something that you're not going to have to worry about with OntarioCars.ca. All the vehicles listed are listed by registered dealers in Ontario, and therefore they come with the protections that you get when you buy from a registered dealer.
Is this going to be used car dealers only, Warren? Or?
It's new and used car dealers. Our association, despite the name, we have almost all new car dealers in Ontario as members.
Because of
They
course
all
new car
sell
dealers
used
are.
cars. Right?
Yeah.
They are used car dealers.
And why do we need another platform?
Well, I think the consumer needs it for the confidence and the protection that what you're looking at and purchasing, you're going to have guarantees and assurances that you're getting a quality vehicle, that you're getting a vehicle advertised at a price that is going to be the price that
So
you
will
pay.
enforce like
And,
pricing
we-
integrity on your
if,
site?
If the price you see is not the price you end up paying, then that's an issue, and we'll deal with that.
So if it's
we
higher,
have to.
in other words, if someone says there's an extra $500 or $600.
That's right. Yeah, as a mandatory fee. Now, we all know there are other features or other products rather that a consumer can purchase as part of the sale, but the basic sale of the vehicle, you got the price, and the law says that price is the all-in price plus taxes and licensing, and that's all that can be added. And the site will be clearer. It'll have the price, and it'll say plus tax and licensing. So That's the law, and we will make sure that our members that are advertising
Now,
are
what
adhering
if
to
I'm a
that.
curbsider and I've got 2 or 3 cars in my driveway? How do I get onto your site?
You're not going to get onto our site.
I can't just...
Nope, you can't, without getting being registered as a dealer, getting a dealer license with OMVIC, and joining the UCDA. So in addition to the protections you have as being a dealer, since as a consumer, you're looking at vehicles offered for sale by UCDA members, you're also getting the added protection of our mediation service. That's run by a lawyer in our office.
Lorraine, this I can tell you because we use it sometimes, and they're very, very good.
They do.
Well,
And
They're very tough
the toughest
service.
cases we get come from George, I'll tell you.
I tell readers and viewers to look for the UCDA logo as well as the OMVIC one. It's like, now, are your people, do they have a little card in their wallet the same as OMVIC people? Because if somebody is selling in their street or
Yes.
even a place, some of them can look like shops now. Like they can look like a lot.
Sure.
They're still not, if you can't
I
find
mean,
the sticker.
A body shop or a collision shop,
Yeah.
a garage, a service facility, a gas station.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're selling vehicles, and most of them are registered as dealers. They may only sell a half a dozen cars a year, but they have a dealer license, and many of them will be UCDA members. But unfortunately, there are still some that haven't got the license and maybe don't even know they need it. And unfortunately, that's an illegal sale.
But a lot of people, unfortunately, ask after the fact. They buy a car and then say, where's my protections? We're telling them, look for these
Well,
things.
actually, Ontario has some pretty neat stuff. It won't always cover, you can't always give back a defective vehicle, but there are situations in Ontario where you have a right.
Well, there are. The national program in Canada, instead of a lemon law, we have something called CAMVAP, which is the
That's
Canadian
for a
Motor
new
Vehicle
But
Arbitration
in
Program.
terms of a used vehicle sale in Ontario, there are rescission.
There are rescission rights under the Consumer Protection Act and the Motor
Yeah.
Vehicle Dealers Act, which
wanna-
OMVIC can enforce.
So that would be an error on mileage, for example?
That's one if you're out by, and I want to get this right, I believe if you're out, if the mileage on the vehicle is out by more than 1,000 kilometers or 10%, 5%, I believe it is, on the bill of sale. In other words, your mileage on the actual odometer when you take delivery is that much higher than what the bill of sale showed, then that is an automatic rescission right should you choose to exercise it, and you have 90 days.
But that's
in
only
which to
with
do
someone
so.
who's registered.
If you're buying from a registered dealer, exactly.
This circles back to my point when people, when they're about to buy, I'm like, ask these basic questions right away. Who are you buying from? Make sure you have this, and then you're open to those consumer regulations. Whereas if you just buy from somebody is sitting at his curb, you don't have access to all those things. We get emotional about a car. I want this car, and we convince ourselves that there's no other car in the world except this one. And we also get very Canadian. We're polite. We don't like to push and say, can I see the ownership? Can I see, do you have the seller's package? Do you have those things? So when those two things go together, people get ripped off, and I'm begging them to call the APA, call the UCDA, call OMVIC, check first, go on websites, and you can see who is a viable seller and who isn't before you even fall in love with this car.
Now, for viewers in Ontario, you do have an additional tool, which is from Ministry Tool, which is a used vehicle information package. And that tells you who the owners were. Theoretically, the person selling, if they're private, should have it to show you, although that's not how it
got one
works.
for a car we were selling.
right.
And
It's not-
CarProof's
More than
on it.
theoretically, legally, the seller is
supposed
required
to
by
have
law to provide it to you.
That's
In
$20.
practice, of course, it
24
doesn't
bucks.
often
Not that.
happen.
The problem is
Yeah.
getting it.
Yeah,
Yes.
Like you can order it online, but it's
Yeah.
mailed 5 days later,
Yeah.
so
But you can go
usually
into
too
one of
late.
those offices.
So you have to go to one of the offices, and what often we see happening with curbsiders is the package information is often only seen at the time of sale.
That's
Yes.
absolutely
You've
Yeah.
already
At
left
any
your
time.
deposit, you're
Yeah.
going through with the deal, and someone says, oh, by the way.
All right, we're going to come back to talk about this some more. Lemonade Car Show, we'll be right back after this message. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC and Crown. I'm with George Ginny, president of the APA, and Warren Barnard. He's with the UCDA. UCDA, Used Car Dealer Association of Ontario. What do you provide to consumers? Why are we glad that you are there, and why are we purposely looking for cars from dealers that you represent?
Well, I'm glad that you're glad that we're here, and I hope consumers are too. Our biggest feature for the consumer, in addition to having the protections when you buy from a dealer, is our mediation service, which we've had in place since the early 90s. I used to run it myself. Now our legal services director, Jim Hamilton, takes care of it. And it is a service for a consumer who's purchased a vehicle from a UCDA member. And in fact, even if it's
Sometimes not.
yeah, I was just going to say, even if it's not a member, we'll try our best to help. And the consumer can contact us, explain the issue to Jim, and he'll contact the dealer. And more often than not, we will get a resolution that everybody can live with and hopefully is satisfied with, and keep it from going to court and dragging on and costing people money, both sides. They're usually fairly simple things. Oftentimes it's just a lack of communication. No, usually, but no, not always.
Actually, we send them hard
again, the ones he
cases.
sends me
I was going
are.
to say, by the time
But-
APA gets them,
Yeah,
it's a
that's
ball
it.
of nightmare.
But,
Well-
you know, Jim, and it's usually just a matter of getting people to talk again and having some communication. And more often than not, we're able to resolve it, if we can resolve it, within a day or two.
It's also interesting because, first of all, the dealer, when they get a call from someone at UCDA, it's almost one of their own. So they kind of move off totally positional stuff, like you signed the paper on 3 sides, so I don't need to see you again. That helps a lot.
Yes, it does.
And I would also say the fact that the mediator has a good understanding of how the business works, so there may be just other solutions that aren't even legal. They're just practical. How do we unwind or make somebody happy?
I think that's
And
the
it's-
right word,
It's
unwind.
kind of,
Get
yeah,
everybody
and
to-
it's it's kind of special
And
actually for us.
Jim's been with us for over 20 years, so I mean, he knows.
He's heard.
He's heard everything. He could write a book.
Now,
And they're not always a good shoulder to cry on because they're not there for that. They really
No.
want to move the file
well, that's a
forward.
sign of a good mediator.
Yes,
Not
totally.
every- not
It's
everybody's
pretty cool.
thrilled,
You're
but
not always
everybody's
right
okay.
when you call
No,
UCDA.
that's
Yeah.
right. And that's a good point, George, because, and I mean, Jim would be the first to say that oftentimes the consumer calling us is looking for an advocate.
Yeah.
Somebody to take their side and represent them, and that's not what we do. We are a neutral party, and as George said, if the consumer doesn't have a solid case or a reasonable argument, Jim will not hesitate to tell them.
You're
But
a
he'll say the same thing to the dealer, though.
Yeah,
Lorraine.
if they're
If the
wrong.
dealer is saying, look, Jim will tell him, you got to solve this. You're not right. You haven't done something that you needed to do, or you've done something that you shouldn't have done.
Okay, so if
Take
we
care
use
of
an accredited dealer, we have something standing behind us. We've got like a big brother who says, we're saying that these people are licensed to cite. What if I'm determined to buy a car that I've seen advertised in Auto Trader or somewhere else? A lot of those are licensed dealers as well.
Of course, yeah.
But sometimes it's a person selling a car. What's the very least I need to be expecting or demanding when I go to see a car that's being sold privately?
Well, you want to know who you're buying from.
Yes.
So
Okay.
to a certain degree, you want to know that there's no money owing on it, so there's some checking that needs to be done.
Is a UVIP, that seller's package, going to have that in it? Liens, CarProof?
Not
Yeah.
that way. Those are separate things.
It has
Well,
a
the
lien.
liens,
It has a
right.
lien
It'll have a
search. It'll
lien.
tell you if there's a lien registered on the vehicle.
So if they're selling it, they should be handing you this package
Yes.
that they picked up within the last week or so.
That's right,
That they
yeah.
spent $20.
Yeah, it'll tell you who the registered owner is, so you want to make sure that it is in the name of the person you're buying it from. And it also gives you the list of all the previous owners. So you'll see if that one-owner gem is really a one-owner gem, or if it's had 6 other owners in its life. And sometimes you can get a clue about its history by looking at the nature of those owners. They may be individuals, but they may be companies. You might see that it was a Hertz rental car or something.
Okay.
Or if it was registered in the name of an insurance company, it's been
That's
in
worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a
That
total
means it-
loss.
They bought it, the insurance company
Yeah.
bought it off somebody, and it's now
And
reappeared back on the road. It
That's
was a
that's
write-off.
a typical curbsider vehicle.
So if they don't-
They buy them at these salvage auctions and then fix them up and
So
sell
if they
them.
don't provide you with this, you go and get this before you give them money for that car.
In Ontario.
In Ontario.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
in
CarProof
Ontario,
is
yeah.
also helpful. Its accuracy varies by province. So in Quebec, it's throwing a dart at a wall. Like literally, the value is like about half the collisions aren't there at all, or the information that's there is from police reports. So it's damage over $1,000, which could mean $1,001 or $19,000.
Okay, then.
But in Ontario, we found it's gotten better. The dealers have access to their own system, right?
We have an accident search database as well that we access.
So could a
for our
consumer
members.
ask to see that? If they were
It's-
looking at a car?
At this point, George, unfortunately, it is exclusively for dealers.
But if I'm
we're
shopping,
not
could I
allowed,
tell the dealer?
We're not
can you-
allowed to show it to the consumer. But
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding.
I say,
That's
look,
a,
can I
that's a
see
whole
your
other
file on the
topic, but
car? The thing won't be, the dealer theoretically
they're
is
not
not
allowed to
allowed to
show
say
it.
here.
The
Clean.
dealer can read it to you, but unfortunately, it's not allowed to be shown. We're under
Well, that's
Interesting
considerable
competition
restrictions from the
issues.
I know.
This
I
is
would- I
a very
would think
interesting
so, but
point for us
it
to
is an
wrap up this
interesting point.
segment on. I'm sorry, we're going to lose Warren.
Come on, think about it. How nasty is that of the insurance
George,
industry?
we will have Warren back. I'm sure he's dying to
That
come
whole
back
show
now
on
that you
that,
brought
George.
that up.
We
Warren,
can.
thank you so much, George. We have to go to break. We'll have more Lemonade Car Show when we come back, brought to you by Omvic and Crown. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by Omvic and Crown. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. This is one of our most popular segments, Ask the Mechanic. George Innie, president of the APA, and we're joined by Brian Early. He's one of my favorite mechanics.
Thank
work
you.
out of
Flattery
Oshawa.
gets you everywhere.
Our theme is used cars, so I'd just like to continue this on into this segment and address some of the most popular or aggravating used car issues that people should be looking for when they're buying a used car from a mechanical standpoint. George, you have a few specific questions for Brian.
CVT transmissions. When they fail, they're ruinously expensive to fix. You can only buy complete assemblies, often directly from the car maker. And I wondered if that's something that when you're checking a used car, someone's coming in with a 4 or 5 year old vehicle, let's say a Nissan with a CVT, what will you be looking for?
There's a
What's
couple
the
of
mileage
things.
point for those that are going to start seeing issues?
Well, the maintenance point is in the 140, 150,000 K range is where Nissan suggests the fluid be changed for longevity. Some of the manufacturers don't have an interval, or some of them are pronouncedly longer.
We
But,
see vehicles that we're testing now, not necessarily CVTs, where the transmission service is at 10 years.
Well, Ford in the F-150s is 240,000 K as its first transmission service interval, which is ridiculous. as far
Oh,
as
you
I'm-
would say, right.
Yeah, the whole idea of fluid for life, I don't. Fluid is relatively, in some cases not as relatively, cheap maintenance.
So what will happen, Lorraine, particularly on off-lease vehicles, that transmission service on a CVT is expensive, right? It's $20 a liter fluid. You need a lot of it. And a lease customer won't bother because they're giving it back. They're not going to spend $400 or $500 on the very last 3 months of their lease to do a service.
So if you're looking at a used car with a CVT,
Yep.
that's the flag to
It's
have
a
some.
good place to look, and unfortunately, some CVT vehicles do not have a dipstick, so you can't even check the fluid quality without going in and opening up something or undoing a line, or
That makes it more pricey.
that makes it more difficult. Well, yeah, it makes it more difficult for us to check the quality if you just bring it in for us to look at it.
And also if you have a leak and it's not picked up.
Yes.
You don't see, because a lot of vehicles now have a tray underneath, so you may not see dripping in your driveway. It could be low.
Absolutely.
Vehicles could be low on fluid and you never realize it.
Absolutely, and the CVTs are not very forgiving of low fluid.
That's right. Yeah, they start to,
It
Perform
gets
wonky.
unhappy quickly.
Okay, we don't see a lot of used 3-year-old vehicles on the market as much as we used to, but there's a lot in the 7 to 8 range. What are some flag points? What should people be looking for if they're looking at a car in that range?
well, first of all, a new vehicle today is going to last 15 years. So 7-year-olds used to be, you're in the bottom end of the market and, under $5,000-$7,000 car.
Great
Today,
cars now.
it's only half used.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things I would say is just don't be a price junkie. Like if you're trying to buy something that's cheap, the cost of bringing it up to even average or even better condition, if you're not doing the work yourself, is always going to be higher than the premium that it would have cost you to buy the same thing in good condition. I don't know if it's the same for houses, but for cars, for sure.
There's something to be said for having a known service history.
Yeah. Think about it, Lorraine. If someone is buying a Honda, let's say, and this one is $1,500 cheaper, but it does need a new set of tires and maybe 2 out of 4 brakes, you've already used up a good part of your $1,500 savings.
Well, that and who owned that car that let it get to that point where it
Someone
needed
who
those?
also didn't do
And
other
what
service.
else were they not all that concerned
Yeah,
about?
I think it's a reflection of more than just
And
needs
it's the
new
downside
tires.
of leased vehicles in particular, because the people know that in 3 years' time, it's going to be someone else's problem. They're a little more casual with repairs and maintenance.
The upside of a lease vehicle is it's a forced sale. Like you actually turned
Yes.
it in because you had a date.
Exactly.
And if it's 3 years old or 4 years old, the maintenance the person didn't do, as long as they at least did oil changes, you probably can catch up by going to a major service and getting everything current.
So that's the upside to a car that's maybe 3 years old
Well,
Agreed.
versus one that's.
Well, I would
Well,
say the upside to leasing was before there were, I mean, I'm going back a long time, but
I got 30 seconds, so.
in the old days, the only way you got a 2 or 3 year old car on the market before leasing was because it was in a collision or someone had a good
Or there
reason
was
to
some
unload
major
it.
nightmare reason they got rid
Yeah.
of it. Yeah.
So there's some great used cars out there, but get it into your mechanic, get it up on the hoist, get them to take a look,
Nothing can compare to having it inspected.
getting inspected. We're going to close on that line because I think that's the best information we can have about used cars. Thanks so much, Brian. Thank you, George. Thanks to you viewers. That's it for the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by Omnic and Crown. We'll see you next time.